video from, this is essentially the DOT cam. You can see there, that is Chamblee Tucker Road, and that's at North Crest. So what you're looking at here is due west towards 285. So at the top of your frame, just out of view, is the perimeter. You see a collection of officers there. Those are DeKalb County officers. They are in the street because the protesters were in the street. The protesters were blocking Chamblee Tucker Road right at the perimeter. Georgia State Patrol was also blocking the on-ramps to the perimeter to prevent protesters from trying to block the perimeter, I-285 around the city. To orient you where this is in the northeast part of Atlanta. It is in DeKalb County, not far from the Gwinnett County line. It is between Embry Hills and the Pittsburgh neighborhoods, if you're familiar with those. And what you have here are police, as you can see, fairly calm right here. But in the top of your frame, a short time ago, we did see puffs of smoke indicating the deployment of tear gas or some sort of crowd dispersal chemical. A veteran myself of the 2020 protests here in Atlanta, I can tell you that these are very typically used when you're trying to clear an area. Sometimes they're using different kinds of chemical dispersants, but essentially they're irritants determined to get people off of an area or away from an area. It appears as though that has been successful. So the people at the bottom of your frame, not directly involved. There are some protesters there by the gas station and the police there forming a perimeter. But most of the action is at the top of the frame in the distance there. We had the protesters blocking the street, and then the protesters were moved off the street by DeKalb County police, again having to deploy some sort of chemical irritant for crowd control. The police, I've been watching this feed now for some time, it appears to be a very measured response. So they are doing what they have to do to make sure the road is clear, but they are not otherwise directly engaging with the protesters. We did see them pushing some protesters back, but it was more of that classic forming a line of officers and then directing them back toward the sidewalk. Once they were on the sidewalk, the police then just sort of held that perimeter so they're not trying to directly engage. A lot of this is about de-escalation. So what they don't want to do is get into a direct confrontation with protesters because that is when protests can turn into riots. At this point, it does not appear to be a riot of any kind, but rather protesters, again, I know we use that phrase mostly peaceful very often, and a lot of people criticize that term, but the protests we've seen today throughout the metro have been peaceful, particularly down by the state capitol. There were protesters gathered there, a large number of protesters for the No Kings protest that was scheduled, and very peaceful, no interaction with police up to this point. Police keeping a perimeter there around the state capitol for a permitted protest. This appears to be related. As you know, there were far more clashes with Brookhaven police in the last couple of weeks that were related protests. And we're going to take now a live look here. This is on the 17th Street Bridge. So that is over the I-75-85 connector there. And this is typical of what we've seen all day, actually, where the protesters have been on the sidewalk, actually mingling with the Juneteenth parade that we are covering on Atlanta News First, and peacefully mingling. You could argue there's some sort of political cross-pollination there where these are not opposed groups. So there was no sort of clashes between groups of any kind, and the police, again, keeping a standoff distance. These protesters are simply gathered on the highway. The highway is a great sort of moving audience if you're trying to get your message out. But they haven't been blocking 17th Street. We haven't even seen an attempt to block the roads within the city of Atlanta itself. Where we have seen attempts to block the road are on Chamblee Tucker Road, out by North Crest, where DeKalb County police have immediately moved in to clear that area. Again, as we mentioned a moment ago, the Georgia State Patrol had positioned cruisers on the on-ramps and troopers. So there is a deliberate attempt to keep any kind of protesters from blocking traffic, because that is when things can get heated and that is when people can get hurt. Because, here in Atlanta, I don't have to tell you, sometimes 285 isn't just the number of the perimeter, it's also the perceived speed limit. Exaggerating a bit there, but you can have some high-speed traffic there, and you do not want pedestrians getting on the road. And certainly we don't want clashes between protesters and vehicles. There you can see this live shot, very peaceful at this point. We do have an Atlanta News First crew headed out to Chamblee Tucker Road in North Crest, where things appear to be calm. If we can take that shot again just for a moment, I want to bring people up to speed for those just joining us. There you can see the police. Those are DeKalb County police. They have moved their vehicles into the road. The reason the police are in the road is because the road is closed. The reason the road is closed is because protesters spontaneously started blocking Chamblee Tucker Road. That is when DeKalb County police moved in, and they immediately moved the protesters back. Some protesters apparently did not move back either quickly enough or to the officers' liking, and we did see puffs of smoke indicating the firing of some sort of tear gas or chemical irritant designed for crowd control. Now, this is used typically, obviously can be abused in certain situations, but we are not seeing that at this point in this case. There are No Kings protests throughout the United States right now, including cities like Chicago and Los Angeles and New York City and Miami. We are not seeing protests today in Minneapolis, and the reason is the No Kings protest was canceled, and the reason it was canceled was because of a shelter-in-place order after what police there are calling politically motivated assassinations of a state lawmaker and a state lawmaker's spouse, and then the shooting of another state lawmaker down the road by a shooter who was impersonating a police officer. This is all happening on the day of the parade that is marking the 250th birthday of the United States Army in Washington, D.C. The pictures you're looking at now, 17th Street Bridge over the downtown connector, very peaceful. Later today, that parade of military personnel and equipment on the Mall of Washington, D.C. Isn't scheduled until 6:30, so that's going to happen later today. There are also protests of that parade occurring in Washington, D.C. So all of this is happening at the same time, related or unrelated. You have the No Kings rallies throughout the United States, including Atlanta, as you're seeing here. You have the U.S. Army parade in Washington, D.C., which also corresponds to President Trump's birthday. And then you also have this politically motivated shooting, according to police in Minnesota, that has canceled the No Kings protest in Minneapolis at this point. It's all happening against the same really opposing political background. We live in a nation right now that has a very sharp divide between left and right, and there are two extremes of left and right. And as of this point, those two sides are not clashing today, particularly in Atlanta, where we are seeing this peaceful demonstration here on 17th Street over the downtown connector. And again, just the only thing we've seen so far, and the reason we're updating you now, is that we're seeing on Chamblee Tucker Road in North Crest, where protesters have blocked the road and they were immediately pushed back by police using both a police line, police vehicles you can see there on the road, and what appear to have been crowd control chemical irritants. I'm Chief Investigator Brendan Keefe with Atlanta News First Investigates. You're going to see Joy Lim Nakrin joining you shortly to keep you updated on this. We do have a crew on the way to the scene at Chamblee Tucker, and of course we have Atlanta News First crews throughout the city and in the metro covering this from top to bottom. We'll see you soon.